Hey, good lookins. Welcome back to Tangled in Tennessee, where we deep dive into haunting, mysterious, and sometimes downright chilling tales of Tennessee's past. If you like country music, true crime, history, mystery, like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, or you can listen to me on Spotify. I am your host, Vanessa LaPepion, and today's story, let me tell you guys. So I got inspired for this story from actually somewhere in Florida. In Orlando, they have a place called Old Town, and it has a electric chair simulator. Y'all, that thing used to freak me out. And when I read about different ideas for the podcast, I seen that Tennessee has a famous electric chair called Old Smoky. So, yes, I was intrigued, and here we are. So, tonight we're traveling back to the 90s, a time when justice in Tennessee moved really fast, when the line between guilty and innocent was thin, and a single night's violence could land you in an electric chair. So the story is about a man named Andrew G. Crumley, and he made his living driving a taxi. It's also a story about a man named George Lewis, who is a friend who never made it home, and four men who on March 1st, 1922, met their end in the infamous electric chair, Old Smoky. Four men, one chair, one night that made history. Y'all guys, if y'all hear snoring again, I don't know what it is. When I go to record this podcast, Bryson has to come in here and lay down. Like, he cannot be by himself, and he snores. I don't know what it is. He's over here like tearing it up with the snoring. So let's jump into it. Andrew Crumley was no stranger to the roads in Morgan County. As a taxi driver in the early 90s, he knew the back roads better than most folks because he drove them all the time. He took countless passengers across the winding paths to do errands. He would take them to work. He would take for a joyride, things that taxi drivers do. They take their passengers where they need to go. But on the night of October 19th, 1921, he picked up two passengers that would forever change his whole life. Those two passengers were named Charles Petrie and John McClear. Crumley wasn't alone the night in the car. He had his friend George Lewis riding with him up front in the seat because he felt that these two guys were strange, and he just didn't want to ride with them alone. He thought that they were doing illegal activity, but in his mind, he thought it was moonshine. Like they needed a car for moonshine and like running it. And he wasn't okay with that. He told the men that, but they assured him that it wasn't a moonshine run. So the two men, Charles Petrie and John McClure, they were going in and out of Oakdale. When they came across, they just bumped into some familiar faces that they knew. One was called Otto Stevens, that was his name, and Tom Christmas. Now, y'all, when I heard the name Christmas, I kept thinking of like Lloyd from Dumb and Dumber. Lloyd Christmas, name for this story, let me tell you. So the men flagged down uh, Tom Christmas and Otto Stevens and asked Crumley to take them for a ride to Clinton. This wasn't an unusual request. Crumley had no reason to refuse it because people did this all the time that rented taxis. It wasn't like Uber. They just, hey, I need a taxi and whoever can get in. So that's what happened. But once those doors closed and the car started rumbling forward, things took a very deadly turn. So the six men set out into the rural darkness. After some awkward silence, they finally started talking. Now, this ride was about 45 minutes, and they started talking. They seemed to ease up the tension at first, and it was just a little bit more enjoyable. But that joy would not last very long. That tension it started right back up again when the four men started acting weird, okay? They were putting on an act, trying to ease George Lewis's and Andrew Crumley's tension. The night was moonless. The sky stretched dark and was empty above the dirt roads. Crumley focused on driving, but something was off. Maybe it was the way that Christmas and Stevens sat in the back whispering to each other. Maybe it was just a feeling. The men asked Crumley to stop the car on a narrow path, which he did. They all got out and looked at a very narrow little road, and they were all four of them jumped out and were looking at this road. Then all of a sudden, all the four men got back into the car and and they told that Crumley that wasn't the place that they wanted to go. See, right there, I would have been like, what do you mean? You got out. I would have drove off, but he didn't. Um, he followed their lead when they asked him to drive up a little bit farther. He did, trying to be a good taxi driver. And he mentioned again, though, that he was not interested in running moonshine if that's what they were doing. He did not want no part of that. They assured him once more, nope, nope, that's not what we're doing. So he let them all get back in. He drove up a little bit farther. And then they went to like a wooded pit area, like a woods area, and it had a big pit. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a cold piece of steel pressed in the back of Crumley's head. And before he could react, like rough hands grabbed him. They grabbed George Lewis, the friend, and yanked both of them out of the taxi car and dragged them into the woods to where this pit was. Crumley and Lewis fought back, but they were outnumbered. It was, the four men against them too. Christmas and Stevens overpowered them, shoving them to the ground, tying their hands up, beating them up, kicking them, roughing them up. And then there was silence. Lewis tried to reason with them in a hoarse voice because he'd done been kicked and all that. And he begged them and demanded to know why they were doing this to them. What is it that they wanted? Because they didn't even have no money or anything. And but Christmas was not listening to them. He took the gun, he raised the gun, and then all of a sudden there was a loud bang and George Lewis's body slumped to the ground, lifeless. And Christmas went up to him and slit George's throat with a knife. Crumley was still bound. There was nothing that he could do but watch. He too was roughed up, tied up when they were being dragged to the pit. He knew that he was next and he was, nervous, scared, and he just knew that he was waiting for the gunshot, but instead they just slit his throat. They didn't shoot him. Some reason, maybe because of the injuries from them being beat up or whether it was luck, they just didn't shoot him and they assumed that he was dead when they slit his throat. Christmas and Stevens, they walked off. So they left him there in the woods. Crumley was still laying on the ground. I mean, obviously he was in pain. His throat had been cut. He was breathing shallow and he waited for the sounds of footsteps to fade. And then when he thought that they were far and gone, he went in to check on George and he noticed that his head was in an awkward position and he tried to rearrange it with his foot. And he told Lewis, Crumley is telling Lewis that he will be back. He did not realize that Lewis was already dead. Crumley was holding his throat with his bound hands, trying to climb up a pit. And you guys, if y'all have never been to Tennessee, pits and hills here, they're a little extreme. So the fact that he was trying to climb up this with his hands bound and his throat bleeding, the poor thing, that's all I could say. Time for an ad break, y'all. Chewy. For dogs that are more spoiled than a biscuit in gravy. Y'all know that dog of yours ain't just a pet, they're your ride or die, your shotgun rider, your four-legged best friend, and let's be real, they run the house. Lucky for you, Chewy's got everything you need to keep them living the good life. Whether it's belly rub-worthy treats, the fluffiest dog beds, or toys tougher than a $2 steak. Lightning fast shipping so they ain't waiting long 24/7 customer service. Ship. So you never run out of their favorites. Want to spoil them even more? Click my link in the description and get a free $20 e-gift card when you spend $49 or more. Shop now at Chewy.com and keep those tails wagging. All right, we're back. Andrew Crumley was desperate for help. He had to get help, but Oakdale was very small. The houses were scattered far in between. Like there was a lot of land in between. So he ran and ran and ran with his hands bound, trying to hold his throat. And it's at night. And he was running and he fell into a barbed wire fence and got all cut up and hurt. So he had to try to unravel himself from that. He was barefoot. He was beaten. He was bleeding everywhere. When he finally reached the first house and he pounded on the door, there was no answer. And then he said that he ran to the next house, no answer, ran to the next. Each time he banged on the doors, shouting for help, he would either hear voices saying, no, they won't help him. Nobody was home. And his heart was hammering in his chest is what he said. He kept reporting. He again was running through in the pitch black trying to find help, hit another fence, another barbed wire fence. But it was late at night and people were asleep. And back then, folks were cautious and they were not just going to open the door for people at night. It just wasn't happening. But finally, with some luck, somebody finally let him in. And within hours, the sheriff was on the move looking for this four men in the taxi car. So the four men, Tom Christmas, Charles Petrie, John McClure, and Otto Stevens, they definitely were not up to no good. So Crumley's sense of them was right on. They actually were planning a bank robbery and they needed a big car like the taxi car because they wanted something big to put all their money in. Like, I don't know what they thought. They needed a huge car. They didn't have like a little bag just to put the money in. But somewhere in their head, they thought, hey, we need a big car. Christmas and Stevens were found hiding in a nearby county of Roane County. Don't come for me if I pronounce that wrong. Roane County, and Charles Petrie and John McClure, their accomplices, were tracked down soon after. The trial was swift. There wasn't much to it because Andrew Crumley actually was still alive and he described in detail every single thing that happened. So in early January 1922, a jury found all four men guilty of murder. There were no lengthy appeals, no drawn out court battles. It was just straight to the death chamber. That's where these four men were going. The sentence was death. By early 1922, the four men were sentenced to death. Their fate lied in the hands of the Tennessee's famous electric chair, Old Smoky. It was built in 1916. Old Smoky had replaced gallows, promising a more humane death. But those who witnessed this knew better. Y'all, I witnessed the fake one. I can tell you, there's no way the gallows were worse. But anyway, the chair was made of solid oak. Its armrests were actually worn smooth from the grip of men who had sat there before. Straps bound the prisoners' arms, legs, chest, and a metal cap was placed on their heads onto a clean shaved area for maximum contact. And then when the switch was finally thrown, a volt surge went through the prisoner's body. So this really went down in Tennessee's history with Old Smoky. Four men, the one electric chair, it was considered Tennessee's deadliest execution. First, Tom Christmas. Now, Mr. Tom Christmas that could slit throats and beat somebody up, he got to go first in the electric chair as his sense of mercy because he was showing the most distress. He was the most scared, yo guys. He wasn't scared when he was slitting people's throats, but he was scared of the electric chair. Second was Charles Petrie. Third to go was John McClure. And lastly to go was Otto Stevens. Tennessee holds the record for the most people executed by electric chair. They said that it was four men within 32 minutes. Old Smoky got its name from the amount of smoke that it put off. And to do this many executions within that short of time, it is said that the room, the halls where the other prisoners were, the smoke was so thick and it smelled so putrid, so rank that they decided not to do that many executions again in one day because of how much smoke and how putrid the smell was. Smoky was used between the years of 1916 up until 2007. You guys, this chair was used until 2007. Can you believe that? When the state officially retired death by execution by electric chair as an option for capital punishment, that is the only reason. So today the chair still exists. It is in the house. It was first in the house of the Tennessee State Prison Museum in Nashville, but now it is in a new location, which is called the Alcatraz Museum in Pigeon Forge. A century later, questions still linger. Did all four men deserve to die? Was justice truly served? Was some of it more harsh than others? So, y'all, I think Mr. Tom Christmas, heck yeah, his justice was served for real. He wasn't scared to cut somebody's throat, leave them to die in the woods, and he was a little wuss about the electric chair. The other ones, they knew, so I think yes. Accomplices, if you know something's going on like that, yeah, Yeah, something like that. Absolutely. I mean, they literally only wanted the car. They killed these two men, attempted to kill one and killed the other for a car. Okay, yeah. Yeah, it was, I feel it was justly served. But Andrew Crumley lived with that memory and it haunted him for the rest of his days. He thought about George Lewis, he said, all the time and what happened, and he wished that he did not ask him to ride with him. He was simply a friend helping another friend out. Can you believe that? As for Old Smoky, that thing still freaks me out. It is sitting, like I said, in the Alcatraz Museum in Pigeon Forge. It's no longer taking lives, but it definitely is carrying the weight of those that it claims. And like I said, if you've not seen a simulator, electric chair simulator, y'all, just knowing what that chair could do, and then it's known for smoking, ugh, I can only imagine. That would give me nightmares. Or have you ever seen The Green Mile when that guard didn't put the sponge, in the water? That right there, I hated that part in that movie. It was so bad. Anyway, justice is never simple. And here in Tennessee, this story proves that sometimes it is downright tangled and electrifying. So that's it for this episode of Tangled in Tennessee. Let me know your thoughts by reaching out on social media and leaving me a comment or even episode ideas. I would love to hear from you and what you would like to hear from next. And don't forget to subscribe to Tangled in Tennessee so you never miss a single story. So until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and keep those tangles out of your hair, girl. Bye, y'all.